Welcome, Daniel. It's great to have you here. I'm excited to dive into the Exepron's journey. How are you doing today?
Yeah, it's been an exciting journey so far. We've been in business now for 15 years. Doesn't seem that long, but yeah. And we just continue to develop some of the features and new technology. So as new technology comes out, we're adapting that into our offering, into our application. And of course, we're starting to leverage AI and all the benefits that brings. So yeah, it's like we're in a race that once you start, it never ends, right? And the goalpost keeps moving, but it's okay. Yeah,
You have been also like co-founder and CEO about Ease of Constraint of International Certification Organization.
Yeah. And in my background, I'm not an IT person, engineer by training, but pretty diverse background. But we have the good fortune to be working with some very, very excellent developers, software people. So my job is kind of steer the ship and keep everything going in the right direction. So I've got the easy job. They've got the hard job.
How do you feel integration with AI-driven recommendations, critical chain thinking? Give us some insights on that.
Well, first of all, there was an immediate advantage we got using AI with the developers themselves, behind the curtain. And we continually, as I had mentioned previously, we continuously look and adapt for the latest technology that's available. And when we develop these new features or go back and redo existing features, the amount of time it's taking on developers, things that used to take 3 to 4 weeks, for example, to go from the initial writing the code and, testing, QA, et cetera, to turn it into a production version, and reduce significantly. I mean, now we're talking 2 or 3 days, and that's everything from developing the initial writing the software, and at the same time, we're simultaneously viewing how it will integrate with the existing code. So we're actually doing writing the software, getting immediate feedback on the impact it has on the existing code. So in essence, we're starting the testing of it real time. And then of course it simplifies and greatly accelerates the final testing in QA to get it ready for production. So it is very significant on making the job easier. And I suppose you could say that about AI in general. That's happening today in many companies, but we're using it to leverage. And then also, as you may know, the critical chain concept was developed by a gentleman called Eli Goldratt, and it's based on the theory of constraints philosophy. So we're integrating AI into that thinking to develop new TOC knowledge, theory of constraints, which is also critical chain new knowledge also, without getting, too technical on this. But because that's the future, right? I mean, IT runs the world. And as an engineer, it took me a long time to accept that fact, but it's a fact. So if we want an approach such as critical chain, which is different, requires some paradigm shifts from the traditional way of managing projects, you need to be cognizant of that. And again, AI can really accelerate that whole process. So Exepron is a project management, an advanced project management solution, a SaaS model, of course. And what we have developed in the past, but it kind of lay dormant, was an application of this critical chain solution for clinics and hospitals. And as you know, the previous government shutdown essentially was over healthcare, right? So the whole affordability and accessibility to healthcare is probably, in fact, I just saw a poll yesterday saying that is the number one concern in the United States is healthcare, and number 2 is the economy. And that kind of, I think, accentuates. So we believe that it's greenfield. And what we're going to do, we've already prototyped the Exepron health application with amazing results. Lowering costs to stay in the hospital, shortening the lead time from time you admit the patient till it's discharged by identifying bottlenecks real time and resolving them. So we're doing what we've been done for many years in the manufacturing world and new product development world. It's totally alien in the healthcare world. And quite frankly, I was shocked when I first started looking into this, because we have some of the arguably most advanced healthcare in this country, but yet the way we manage it, the operations of their hospitals is shocking. We're measuring the wrong things. And, if I ran a manufacturing company like a hospital, I'd be out of business. I'd be totally non-competitive. As you know, hospitals are very needed, and you just can't shut down a hospital, right? And you have to pour more money into it. And the initial response is, well, I need more capacity. So spend more money, have to raise more money, build another wing, buy more, get more beds, and hire more people. And it's really, they're not resolving the issue. In fact, in many cases, it actually gets worse.
Yeah.
So we focus them on the patient flow. So it's very much patient-centric. And all of the many, many millions of dollars is being spent on IT in hospitals. And they have some just huge companies like Epic and a few others, but they're not really patient-centric. They're a sophisticated billing and tracking costs, things like that. But in terms of being able to provide the patient, I'll call them healthcare units, the value added they're providing to a patient is very much dependent on a continuous flow of the healthcare that's being provided while they're in the clinic or the hospital, and they don't do that.
How about this patient-centric model which you are building with apps? Is it like B2B or it is like B2C part of your system?
Well, think of it as the back end is project management. So we treat each patient that's admitted into a hospital or a clinic as a project.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most of that is behind the curtain, so to speak. So what we did was we took that project management solution with Critical Chain, we developed a totally new user interface. So what the users see is totally different. And actually, it's more simplified. And in fact, in the not too distant future, we will be adapting much of what we've learned from the Exepron Health application into the project management application. So it keeps us on our toes, and we're very excited about it. But we realized that doctors, nurses, technicians, they're not project managers. And they're not taught that in medical school. And although I will point out to you, there is one medical school that is dramatically different from all the others. And it's a new medical school in Arkansas, University of Arkansas. And many dollars were donated by the Walton family. They have a totally different outlook on medical care. And we're pretty excited about it. We're not associated with them. I don't want to, but it is the only medical school that we've seen that's really open to looking at different ways of providing healthcare, better, cheaper, faster. And I'll just tell you one thing about this university is that almost all of the medical schools admit candidates who have a pre-med degree, bachelor's degree in pre-med. Now, this you'll find surprising. This medical school at University of Arkansas will not admit a candidate if they have a pre-med bachelor's degree, because they want to just get rid of all the baggage that they're bringing in pre-med that it's taught today in universities, and they want to take a fresh look. So, for example, if you go into a medical school, you start seeing patients right away with of course, a real doctor. But whereas in the traditional medical schools, you don't see a patient until second or third year. So it's attached. Another big difference they have is there are no cadavers, which is a big part of medical training where you get the cadavers. And that's all been replaced now. And they don't use cadavers, they use AI. So all of that training that they did with the exposure to cadavers, they now do with AI, which they claim is much better. They can do everything they can do with cadavers using AI. So keep our fingers crossed. Maybe they'll come across Exepron Health, and because it would fit right into their whole mindset and the way they're training the future doctors. So anyway, so that's what keeps us busy. We have prototyped this Exepron Health with very, very encouraging results for reducing the length of stay, etc. So
It is actually like when we discuss about our model is based on theory of constraint. What is this theory of constraint concept, and are the challenges you currently have, and how are you looking at them after? What are you expecting from?
We'll keep it very basic. The theory of constraints was developed by Dr. Eliyahu Goldratt, and his training, he was a physicist, was his training, and applied a new way of thinking. And if you look at a company or a hospital or any organization, is a system, right?
Yeah.
And every system has a constraint. So if you want to increase the throughput of a system, then you have to maximize the throughput at that constraint. So it doesn't matter, let's say you have a company with 30 different types of resources, right? So one of them will be a constraint.
Yes.
And that will determine the output of the company. And so it simplifies it in many ways. And then you protect that constraint so that it's always available and you don't exceed the capacity of that constraint. And if you need additional throughput, then you need to increase that particular resource. So it simplifies the focusing of what management needs to, how they should be managing the company. So that, in a nutshell, is the basis. And then obviously we've developed many different uses of that, such as critical chain, which is a new way of managing projects. And you may be surprised, but some of our, well, not some of, but our largest industry sector that uses Exepron is manufacturing. Okay. And so it simplifies in many. Now, having said that, it requires some paradigm shifts, which are being taught today, and which many of the experts that have been in the business for many years, they have to change the way they think. They have what we refer to as the cost world. So they want to reduce costs. They're focusing on individual costs as opposed to throughput, which is the value added of that stream, a value stream of whatever you're producing. It could be a physical product. It could be knowledge. It could be an application you're building with software, whatever it is. And then what we do is we focus on the continuous flow of all this added work or added value that you're providing. So in order to do that, we have to challenge and, in fact, change some of the long-held beliefs that are just absolutely don't make any sense in this day and age. But they're still being taught. You go to get an MBA degree, and they're still teaching the stuff that's absolutely counterproductive in many, many ways. So, yeah. So our biggest challenge is to continue to educate our clients. Your best clients are, the more educated they are, and the better clients they will be. And TOC is making an impact now. But because it is so powerful, number one, and it is challenging conventional beliefs that have been for many decades. And that's our biggest challenge is educating our customers. Once they see the results, and if you've looked at our website, you'll see they're pretty amazing. And we have clients in virtually every industry sector you can think of. So a lot of our clients are international overseas. So anyway, that's my big challenge, is to educate customers, educate the market. But every year, the concept of TOC is growing and growing, as is Exepron. So,
what is the challenge you are having with educating the customer? And if one from our audience, maybe one of my previous clients or anybody in this system already solved this problem, would you accept them as a potential solution for your problem?
Well, first of all, one of the things that we developed with Exepron is a very powerful simulator, okay? And we can, with the simulator, we can show them the before and the after. So the simulations, a series of 14 simulations, we can take a group through or an individual, and we can show them, okay, this is the way the assumptions are that you have today. You're focusing on individual costs and individual efficiencies, okay? And those are the first of the 14 simulations, and they will document the results. Then we will show them where they need to change. And instead of measuring individually, like a work center or an area in the company, the metrics need to be on the throughput. Is it increasing throughput or is it not? Okay. And what the individual parts of the company are doing, they're really of secondary importance. And they should not be the primary metrics that guide your decisions that you make every day. Okay. So again, without getting too detailed here, that's the big difference it makes. Again, dramatic. And you name the industry, we probably have customer in that industry. And the results are very, very compelling. And you compare it to the results that you get. So if you look at the latest data that I've seen on projects, for example, and if you look at from the start of the project to the end of the project, when it finishes, and then you compare it to using the theory of constraints, critical chain thinking, we reduce the cycle time from start to finish anywhere from 20, 30, 40% shorter schedule. And if you look at the data that shows, and it's published by many different professional organizations, including the Project Management Institute, amongst others, that projects on the average finish on time and on budget probably 25 or 30% of the time. Okay. So most of them are late and most of them are over budget.
I see.
Yeah, when you compare it to, and let's talk specifically now about Exepron, or companies that use Exepron, and these are numbers we collect from the customers themselves, anywhere from 20 to 40% shorter, okay? And they're on time 95% of the time, 95% of the time, as opposed to 30 or 40. So those are the results speak for themselves. They're pretty dramatic. They're very dramatic. But again, it's focusing management on other measuring and what's important. And in the case of Exepron, it's a predictive model. In other words, it is predicting earlier in time when the project's in trouble. Because no matter how good of a schedule you have, how good critical chain is, your variability, right? Stuff you can't eliminate that. So you do a good job in planning, then you turn the schedule, start the schedule, and then variability hits. And it rains. People don't show up. The list is endless, right? So what we're built into the solution is what we call time buffers. So that variability hits, we can identify it very quickly and focus the team on the tasks that are really not just today. In fact, in many cases, you don't see the result, but you suffer from it downstream. So what we can do with our predictive model is we can show the impact. Let's say a task is late. We can show the impact it will have downstream. So they get the sense of urgency that team needs to focus on getting this task back on track the best they can. And then the same applies with the resources. If you plan on how you're going to use your resources and you don't respond to that variability very quickly, it will totally upset your schedule. So for example, if you use a conventional project management, they have what we call the critical path, right? Which is the longest chain of task dependencies. Every time you update the project, daily, and how much time remaining in each task, then the critical path will move. So ostensibly every day you could have a different critical path. Now, if I were to tell you that when you, in critical chain now with Exepron, when you start, and we call it the critical chain. So critical path is the longest chain of task dependencies, right? predecessor, successor, right? With critical chain and then Exepron, of course, the critical chain consists of those predecessor and successor tasks. You tie them together, but also the resources required for each of those tasks. And that is a big difference from conventional critical path methodology, because you have a big impact on, and we can look and be able to see if a task is late, then what the impact it will have downstream. You can only do this with technology. You can't possibly look at all the permutations, but with our solution, you can. And it will identify and prioritize which tasks management should be the most concerned about. So we give them a priority list based on the prediction, the predictability. So that's a major departure from even like the Microsoft project, which is probably 85% of people in project management use Microsoft project. And they very cleverly ignore variability as we plan for variability. But the problem with variability is you don't know when it's going to impact a project. It shows up. It's going to rain tomorrow. If you're building a house and you can't do outside work maybe, right? So build that in there, and we provide what we call little time buffers at strategic points in the project. So that's another way, another metric that we use to point out to management early in time where they need to be concerned about. Because in many cases, these tasks are just below everybody's radar. And it don't seem like they're a big deal because they're not like a really sexy task, but they're predecessor to other tasks. And it's amazing what happens. So when you look at all of the tasks that are a successor to this task, wow, it opens your eyes up. Okay. People are not, that have been using critical path, this is new for them. They've never been able to do this before. They tend to just get, focused in on, each task and then try to manage that task without understanding the impact it has on the whole system or the whole project. So that's one of the main reasons that people can finish with such a high on-time delivery of the project. So to sum all of that up, if unlike conventional project management with critical path, if I were to tell you that the critical chain itself that you start the project with, in most cases, will be the same critical chain you end up with. It won't change. It's that significant of a difference. Okay? So that in a nutshell, all you need to know about critical chain in Exepron. And so we're measuring time. And, when I ask groups that I work with or clients, and I'll ask them, why are projects late? And of course, if people are honest and truthful, they understand their record of finishing projects on time are 30, 40%. We work with clients who have never finished a project on time, ever. They're late 100% of the time.
It's a miracle.
That used to shock me, but not anymore. Okay. So when we present them with a vision, look, we're going to get you into the 90% plus. Okay. On the average, 94 to 95%, what most of our clients see. It's a real shock to the system. So that's why one of the main reasons we developed a very powerful simulator to show them, okay, this is real. And in fact, one of the things we do before we use, as part of the training, our simulators, we tell them that this simulator is a simulator, because a lot of it's so real that they think this is the actual application itself, where of course it's not.
So, Daniel, like you say that even the Microsoft project management also which people are using today, have been getting like around 75 to 80% of the growth, and your project critical thinking project management is achieving almost 95% of the accuracy in terms of problem solving and handling their challenges. So what is like a sales point of view, why you are like still not able to create the market monopoly using your product, Exepron products?
That's a wonderful question, and I wish I had the answer, and I don't. But you would think it's something that is demonstrated is so powerful, the solution, that the whole world would immediately adapt it. But when you have, again, you go back to universities, MBA programs, you teach all this stuff, it's nonsense, quite frankly. And you go into basic economics, and they're teaching about their accounting. The basic accounting for making decisions is flawed, okay? And if you talk to an accountant like a CPA, he will tell you, don't make decisions based on accounting, okay? But yet it is the law of the land. And if you go all the way up to the IRS and you look at Congress, they're all based on this, what we call the cost world. They're measuring, so they're taking a system, they're breaking it into little pieces and assigning a cost to every one of these pieces in the system, right? And it tells you very little. And once you become familiar with TOC, you understand, and you actually see it working. You say, my goodness, how? So to answer your question, so as long as the universities, no, we work with some universities too, but they're such a small percentage that they're barely making a dent. So that's the challenge. It's not just, how do we make a project performance better? That's important, of course. It's all these other things that drive these behaviors, okay? So it's changing the way people think is part of our challenge.
Are you targeting specific country or to educate the people about your software, or you are open for all over the market?
Well, there's a professional organization called the Theory of Constraints International Certification Organization, which is kind of where the TOC knowledge resides today. So we work with them. We do presentations and things like that. And we have a very nice website that we try to keep up to date. A lot of it is, the good news is, a lot of our clients come from word of mouth. They recommend it. And if a person is working in a company and they're using Exepron, then they leave the company and go to another company. And then in many cases, that's one of the first things they want to do, because they've been exposed to something that is different that probably the company they're now working for is not doing. So that is a big source of our growth and our expansion on the use of Exepron. But if that's going to take too long, if the whole concept of theory of constraints and critical train is really starting to grow significantly. And we're starting to see more and more and getting more queries about based on success. And that's not coming, very little of that's coming from universities. Although we have some universities that are actually using Exepron as part of their curriculum, but just a small percentage.
Yes.
So,
increase that. Sorry, I was just saying, if you increase that percentage, somehow like from our audience, if there are AI workflows can help you there. Maybe I think you will get more clients, more visibility.
Yeah, it's a continuous challenge because there are so many beliefs that have been built up, especially in the 20th century. And you go back to probably the 1920s, let's say, coming out of the Industrial Revolution, if you look at companies, what they did was, most companies would develop a single product. It could be a buggy whip, it could be whatever it is. And what happened was in the 1920s or so, you had companies, especially like DuPont, okay, with big chemical, where they produce many different products, okay? So the same thinking when you have multi-product companies carried over, and they do things and develop systems and what we call cost accounting that just don't make any sense at all. And like I mentioned earlier, you talk to many of the accountants and CPAs, they'll tell you this is a way for tax purposes, for regulatory issues, you have to comply with GAAP, right? Generally accepted accounting principles. It's all based on this cost accounting. They will tell you privately, but for heaven's sakes, don't use that data to make decisions, okay? Then you ask them, well, okay, then what should I use? Well, they don't have an answer. Well, with theory of constraints, we have an answer, and we call it throughput accounting. Okay? And it accommodates what I said, the transition from the cottage industries of single product companies to companies with many, many dozens or hundreds of different products, right? But to treat all of the products the same, and it's just crazy. They embed the costs of running the company and they spread it over all the products, and whereas we don't do that with the theory of constraint. So anyway, without getting into more detail, so that is what we're up against when we. So it's not just a challenge of saying, "Hey, we have a better mousetrap," which we do, but it is changing the way people think, and much of it they're taught. It starts in while they're still in grade school and high school, and then it gets even worse in college, right? And so by the time they get into the workforce, they're primed for this. And then the people in the workforce, experienced people in the workforce, they've gone through the same thing too. So they've got these methodologies and thinking that's been set in concrete. And what we do with the theory of constraints is we challenge them, say, no, that's wrong. There's a better way. So that has to take place. And then once they see it working, then they very rapidly will accept it. So with Exepron, we have built Exepron with different technologies. And the way that Exepron talks to itself internally is via APIs, right? And then outside of Exepron, we have a very well-developed capability within a company of being able to have Exepron communicate with their legacy systems. Okay, we have our own portal where you can make that happen. And then just if you have an ERP, for example, then you can, with APIs, real time, you can exchange data back and forth quite easily. And in most cases, the companies can do it themselves because of the way we designed the portal. It's kind of like follow the bouncing ball. And if they can't, need a little bit of help, then we'll provide some technical help to get them started. And then once they're up and running, off they go. And so, for example, many companies will be using Microsoft Project.
Yeah.
So what we can do with them is if they want to use all these schedules they have, is to export it into Exepron. And then once it gets into Exepron, we can identify the things they have to correct to turn this into a critical change schedule. Okay. And we can do that fairly quick. There are just, so for example, with Microsoft Project, you can have a task, okay, with no successor. And when you ask people, well, why are you doing that task? Well, it's something I need to do. But do you need that task? Is that part of the project? Well, no, not really, but I just stuck it in there. Because, saying, we can't do that. So we need to correct that when you take a conventional schedule that they've just imported, and it will point it out, literally the little red circles there. You need to correct that. What's the successor? So in a critical change schedule, every task, except for the final task, of course, has a successor task. That's one of the where you don't have that discipline in Microsoft projects. So you just there because, that's good. It's a good way to track it, for example. But it really is no business being actually in the project schedule at all. So that's just one minor issue. And we checked for, and this is the last thing I'll say about, and then we checked for what we call recursive logic. And it goes like, here's task A, and that's a predecessor to task B, right? So that's the successor. And then task B is a predecessor to task C. So you have three tasks. So with Microsoft Project, you can go A to B, right? And to C. And then C, it circles back to A. It's not logical. It's recursive logic. You're in do loop. It's crazy. But Microsoft Project will let you develop a schedule like that. And it's just one of many ways that projects run into trouble because it doesn't make any sense. But people have, as you know, a tendency, if they see it in a software solution, it becomes real. And they don't question, well, it's in the schedule, of course. Except when they try to execute that, it drives them nuts, and they waste a lot of time. Anyway, that's just one of the many things that we checked for before we accept, it before we accept the schedule, they import it as a critical chain schedule. And it's actually easier than what I just described because it's very, very apparent once you see it.
Do you have any trial subscription for your product? We can go and get on the trial.
Yes, we have subscription. We're a SaaS model, so we offer a free 30 or 60 day. I think it's 30 days still. So you can just go to Exepron.com and sign up for a 30-day free trial, and then you can play around with it. And if you're really interested, I could set up let's say a 1-hour session with our simulator, and I can share. And it's quite an eye opener when you see it. You'll never be the same after. It's like, my goodness, I can't believe I'm been doing this. But so our biggest challenge is educating, the world, but one client at a time. That's all we can do.
Got to that say, I think we just have left 10 more minutes.
Yes, we have. It's very enjoyable. And so what's your business? What's it look like?
I am also trying to enter into the B2B SaaS solution. I'm just doing the analysis, currently working with one of the big companies, and I'm trying to make my own space in this industry, specifically on B2B SaaS. And I'm interacting with the people, doing the podcast, understanding from them, and whatever the challenges they are facing. Is there a way I can solve that problem? I will first understand. Or maybe there is a possibility where some other client have the same problem, which you already resolved. So I'm trying to connect them together. That would be through my workflow. This is like my vision. And you give me a good concept of thinking, a critical chain of thinking and the strategy launch by Exepron Health. So I will do some research on it. And it was incredibly, I'm delightful that to have you here on my show.